All right, welcome to Why Is This Good? A podcast by the Naples Writers Workshop. I'm Christine. I'm here with John. Hey, John.
Hello.
Well, it's my turn. I picked a story by George Saunders called Sea Oak, and it's a weird one.
The story should have been called Show Your Cock.
Wow. I'm hearing some insane words between this episode and the last one out of your mouth.
What?
Fiction doesn't have to be a story. This one should have been called. Wow. John's on something. All right, so I'm going to read a section here. From the payphone, I call home to see if they need anything from the food so quick. Just come home, Min says stiffly. Just come straight home. What is it, I say. Come home, she says. Maybe someone's found the body. I imagine Bernie naked, Bernie chopped in two, Bernie posed on a bus bench. I hope and pray that something only mildly bad's been done to her, something we can live with. At home, the door's wide open. Min and Jade are sitting very still on the couch, babies in their laps, staring at the rocking chair. And in the rocking chair is Bernie, Bernie's body. Same perm, same glasses, same blue dress we buried her in. What's it doing here? Who could be so cruel? And what are we supposed to do with it? Then she turns her head and looks at me. Sit the fuck down, she says. In life, she never swore. I sit. Min squeezes and releases my hand, squeezes and releases. You, mister, Bernie says to me, are going to start showing your cock. You'll show it and show it. You go up to a lady. If she wants to see it, if she'll pay to see it, I'll make a thumbprint on the forehead. You see the thumbprint, you ask. I'll try to get you 5 a day at $20 a pop, so $100 a day, $700 a week, and that's cash, so no taxes, no withholding. See, that's the beauty of it. She's got dirt in her hair and dirt in her teeth, and her hair is a mess, and her tongue, when it darts out to lick her lips, is black. You, Jade, she says, tomorrow you start work. Anderson Labels, 5th and Rivera. Dress up when you go, wear something nice, show a little leg, and don't chomp your gum. Ask for Len. At the end of the month, we take money you made and the cock money and get a new place, somewhere safe. That's part of phase 1. You men, you babysit. Plus you quit smoking. Plus you learn how to cook. No more food out of cans. We gotta eat right to look our best because I'm getting me so many lovers. Maybe you kids don't know this, but I died a freaking virgin. No babies, no lovers, nothing went in, nothing came out. Haha, dry as a bone, completely wasted this pretty little thing God gave me between my legs. Well, I'm going to have lovers now, you fucks. Like in the movies, big shoulders and all, and a summer house and nice trips, and in the morning in my room, a big vase of flowers. And I'm going to get my nipples hard standing in the breeze from the ocean, eating shrimp from a cup, you sons of bitches, while my lover watches me from the veranda, his big shoulders shining, all hard for me. That's one damn thing I will guarantee you kids. Haha, you think I'm joking? I ain't freaking joking. I never got nothing. My life was shit. I never even went up in a freaking plane. But that was that life, and this is this life, my new life. Cover me up now with a blanket. I need my beauty rest. Tell anyone I'm here, you all die. Plus they die. Whoever you tell, they die. I kill them with my mind. I can do that. I am very freaking strong now. I got powers, so no visitors. I don't exactly look my best. You got it? You all got it? We nod. I go for a blanket. Her hands and feet are shaking and she's grinding her teeth and one falls out. Put it over me, you fuck, all the way over, she screams, and I put it over her. We sneak off with the babies and whisper in the kitchen. It looks like her, says Min. It is her, I say. It is and it ain't, says Jade. We better do what she says, Min says. No shit, Jade says. All night she sits in the rocker under the blanket, shaking and swearing. All night we sit in Min's bed, fully dressed, holding hands. See how strong I am? She shouts around midnight, and there's a cracking sound, and when I go out, the door has been torn off the microwave, but she's still sitting in the chair. this story blew my mind.
This is great.
I don't know where I found it or why I picked it. It's always the same where I'm scrambling to find something and I pull up like a list and it's like the best free fiction online and I click. And when I started reading this one, it was quick and it opens with this brother, the nephew, who has a very bizarre job at like a aviation themed strip club for men. And he's just like getting hit on by these middle-aged women and it's disgusting. He's not like fully on board with it. Part of it feels weird to him too. But this is like a lower middle class family, like or a poor family, and they're like scrambling. He has to do it for this money, and some of the money seems good and some of it seems bad. Anyway, their aunt dies. And the story goes from being like, I don't know, a story about them scraping by and then their favorite aunt dying to this. And when I read this scene, it accomplished everything that it needed to accomplish in the sense that we were experiencing what the characters are experiencing. Like Bernie died a saint and she comes back swearing like a sailor, and she shouldn't come back, first of all. But the difference between who she was then and now, and like how she's talking and how she's kind of taking control and what she's demanding of these kids all of a sudden. And they're probably like in their 20s, but they don't have their act together. And Bernie was like their North Star, but now she's directing them very, very, very differently, like with fear. And it's really extreme. And I just love that whole section where she's talking. She's just ranting. She's got this plan that she's hatched in the crypt, and she comes back and it's fully formed. And she's like, this is what we're doing. And when she swears, I'm like dying. I think it also kind of hints at like the resolution, because I don't know about you, but after I realized what this story was going to be about, like a real zombie, I had no clue it was going to be a zombie story. By the end, I was like, where's this go? Like, where could this possibly go? That it's going to end on an emotional note. And what it does is revisit the sentiments in that section I just read. This idea of she feels like she was cheated out of life. And by all accounts, she was a good person and she did good to others, and she was loved and respected and missed. But, she's been given this bizarre opportunity to reflect, and she's now saying, I did it wrong. I didn't get what I wanted. I died without these things that everyone else had that I realize now I could have had, but maybe I needed to take them kind of by force. And that is like such a universal sentiment. Whether or not your goal was to get your nipples hard with the sea breeze, the end is talking about all the regrets that you have, and then kind of badgering yourself about what you think you should have done differently to get it to turn out that way. That's like the unique spin on it. Not just like I died and I didn't have kids. It's like I died, but I didn't try this and this and this and this and this to get what I wanted. It's almost like she's lamenting having rolled over in life.
Yeah, this story is made me think of the Metamorphosis, Kafka, because Gregor Samsa turning into a giant bug at the beginning of that story is it's a metaphor for how he feels about his life, and then what happens to him and the way his family tries to take care of him and then just winds up locking him in a room, letting him die, is kind of a metaphor for how they treat him or how they're going to treat him because of what he's become, because of, his work and his life. And this is similar to that, where when she returns to them, the way she treats them, the way they interact with her, and what she kind of insists they do, it's kind of a metaphor for their feelings about her life now that she's gone and their own lives, right? It's kind of like an impetus and an impulse to react to that. Instead of it just making it a rumination or like thought processes, you could easily see this story written where the character just thinks about his aunt and says, well, she never did anything and now she's dead, so I need to do something. Instead, you bring her back on stage and you have her harangue them, and you have her like be that kind of impulse personified, so that she's the direct cause of them, like him trying to change his life a little bit later. And also, when he thinks back on her and what his question about her would be, it's not merely like this introspection. It's like about a concrete event, a concrete like undead creature sitting in his house. Anyway, so that connection between those two, this made me think of that.
Yeah, that's a really good example. I don't want to give my takeaway yet, but that kind of made me that gave me one. In both this zombie story and the Metamorphosis story, neither of these writers set out to write about a bug or a zombie, right? They set out to write about this sentiment. And sometimes we think it happens in the opposite way. But this is obviously one of the most memorable ways to communicate those takeaways that they want you to have. I'll always remember Bernie as, the undead, spewing at this family while her ear falls off. That's such a, he could have picked any way to tell this story, maybe in a eulogy or whatever, like you said, from a different perspective. And it would not have been as in your face memorable if there hadn't been a guy that turns into a bug. You remember it for the plot, but the plot is memorable. And then you remember a takeaway versus the takeaway has to be so memorable that you remember the story. There's certainly stories like that, but this is a way to shoehorn yourself into someone's psyche.
That's right. And I'm glad you read that one section where she does that long harangue, because that really represents, that could be internal, but the fact that she's saying all that stuff out loud, it's coming from a creature that used to be her, makes that much stronger, that much, kind of encapsulates everything.
I think too, in that moment, I wasn't thinking to myself, oh, I know what he's about to do now. I wasn't then reading the rest of the story, hoping that, Bernie gets what she wants. And oh, a second chance. It was more like, this is bizarre. No clue where this is going. Like problems are compounding, right? Bernie's getting more and more unwieldy. And you just like don't know how it's going to end. It wasn't until the ending that he revisits that monologue of hers. And then you realize that that was the takeaway. So that's another thing I think to think about is this story was enjoyable for me because Bernie was such a character, but also because the premise was so bizarre. And I was just kind of along for the ride, you know? And then that's why I say it like shoehorns the message in, because had it been a more subdued telling, I might have checked out. So I read all the way and then I reflected as I should. And I was like, wow, this is really good. Like it was all there.
Yeah, the ending was one of those. A lot of times, fictional endings have this kind of list. You're left with, okay, I have to think about this. Like, what does this all mean? But here he talks about having a recurring dream where Bernie comes back again. He says, every time it's the same thing. Some people get everything and I got nothing. She says, why? Why did that happen? Every time I say I don't know, and I don't. He kind of like puts it in your face there at the end. It's like, this is what's important.
Yeah. And that's like a on the nose, like you said, in your face, here's the point. That's presented in a way that's still like authentic for this character. Our main character here that we're following, I mean, he's a male stripper. We're made to believe he's like, if not a total meathead, at least like not the brightest of the bunch. He's like this haphazard male figurehead of the family, but he's not anyone to look toward for help. So when he's saying that to Bernie in his dreams, right? Like, I don't know. I don't like that's true for him, but it's also the takeaway.
Yeah.
He didn't have to say something profound for you to get it, right? He didn't have to like break character and be like, I don't know. It's like every time there's like a janitor in a movie and they say something profound, it's like, wow, never expected it from a janitor, never expected it from a blue collar worker. And here it's like his response is in keeping with what we expect out of him, right? He's not this profound guy.
He's not the sage.
No. And we're not looking to him for anything kind of life altering in terms of advice, but that him saying, I don't know, like it's on the nose as a reader, but it's authentic for him too.
He's an interesting character. I was trying to figure this story out before I got to the Bernie stuff and it just like sucked me in. I was trying to figure out who is this character? It's told in the first person and yet the whole thing has this kind of comic, serious, satirical tone to it, where it's funny. You want to laugh at it, but it's got this like remove to it, kind of like an academic indifference. It's like anthropological or something, a bit emotionless, like there's this part where he says after Bernie dies and they're going to the funeral and they meet with their mother or his mother and her new boyfriend, and they're all at the restaurant, and the Freddie, Ma's boyfriend, steps up and says he didn't know her very long, but she was an awful nice lady and left behind a lot of love, etc., blah blah blah. And that's how he's reporting to us what happened there. So you're like, he's not like, it's a little bit funny. And like, even at the very beginning, when he walks in the house, his sister and cousin, I think. Yeah. Min's my sister, Jade's our cousin. And they're watching TV. They're watching How My Child Died Violently, hosted by Matt Merton. 6'5" blonde is always giving the parents shoulder rubs and telling them they've been sainted by pain. Today's show features a 10-year-old who killed a 5-year-old for refusing to join his gang. The 10-year-old strangled the 5-year-old with a jump rope, filled his mouth with baseball cards, and locked himself in the bathroom and wouldn't come out until his parents agreed to take him to Fun Time Zone, where he confessed, then dove screaming into a mesh cage full of plastic balls. This is like, there's like satiric tones to this, like, I don't know.
Right.
He's just reporting it. He's not commenting on it in a way.
Right.
But the fact that he's reporting that, whenever a narrative takes a moment to describe something that's not immediate to the characters, you wonder, why is it describing this thing? And the tone of this and the feeling of this makes it feel like he's doing some sort of satirical commentary, but it's first person. So you wonder, who is this guy? And then there's these little moments. She died, right? He comes home and she's dead in the chair. And he says, I sit down beside Bernie. I think, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't here when it happened. And sorry you never had any fun in your life. And sorry I wasn't rich enough to move you somewhere safe. I remember when she was young and wore pink stretch pants and made us paper chains out of Drugtown receipts while singing Froggy Went A Courtin'. All her life she worked hard. She never hurt anybody. And now this. he's describing a really sharp emotion in that moment. I'm
Right.
so sorry. I'm so sorry. But it's such a difference. Like, he's reporting the emotion in the same way he was reporting the TV show, like a few paragraphs before, right? It still has that kind of academic, satirical remove to it. So the question is like how I was having trouble trying to figure this character out because of all that.
Right.
It works though. It's really fascinating how well it works.
Well, I think with like first person, especially, it's the quickest way to establish a character is to see what they ramble about.
That's right.
Like,
yeah.
not just who they are, but their voice too. That was what was strongest, I think, in this piece was his voice. And you're like instantly reminded of it. Even the scene that I'm reading where it's like it's Bernie's dialogue. But like the overall cast of characters have this sarcasm about them and they're all in shit situations, but they're all kind of aware of it. I don't know. When I was reading it, I was like, this is George Saunders showing you how good he is at coming up with a guy that feels pretty real. The way he's talking, it feels like a real stream of consciousness almost, or how he would tell you his day went,
Yeah. Well, he's focusing on little details, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's that kind of guy that, would come home and like find his sisters, or is it his cousins? I don't even know.
One's a sister, one's a cousin.
Okay. Watching like this shit TV show and him being like, oh yeah, this is what's this, I don't know. I didn't like look into any of that other than to think like, wow, this is what this guy pays attention to. It's pretty funny. I'd listen to him talk for a while,
Yeah.
But before I realized that this was first person, now that you just reminded me, I was thinking about how something overall in the story felt familiar to the Stephen King story that I picked a while back.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I forget what that one was called, but it was
Herman
where
Woke is still alive.
Wow, you're so good at this. So the poor woman and her friend hit the lotto or something.
They won a modest amount of money in the lottery.
A modest amount, but they're like about to literally upend their lives, and they're like in the car together driving away, and then they like crash and die. But what was familiar to me about it was their financial situation, where they are on the ladder. Like this family, I don't know if I'm going to be able to say this correctly, but I feel like when you write regular fiction, and when I say regular, I mean, you're not thinking too hard about who you're writing about. When you just say like, oh, I have an idea for a character and I'm just going to like write it, you're probably thinking like middle class, right? And you're probably thinking white. And I know if I'm me and I have like a faceless character, that's who I would have to box them into if I was forced to describe them. If I haven't given my character much thought, that's the default, is my situation. A white woman in her 30s who's middle class. And I say this with some caution, but I think when you are imagining characters in a very, 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 very different situation from you, but maybe close enough that you're able to write it, I don't mean write a different race in a different country in a different time period and expect it to be authentic, but if I was to imagine a family in my same neighborhood, in my same time period, who made a lot less money and I knew where they lived, you're forced to personify them more. You're forced to develop them more. They become realer characters when you are actively telling yourself as the writer that they're different from you. And I feel like that was what was familiar about this piece and the Stephen King piece, was that these people who are down on their luck financially, and we have to get that they come from a different social class, the way that you quickly establish that is much defter writing than your average writing. And it's not just describing what they look like physically, but it's in their dialect. It's like you said, what this character is noticing. And it doesn't have to always go down. It doesn't always have to be you imagining someone that you think is less fortunate than you, because I think that that's where you do get into trouble. But if you're forced to imagine any character other than you, like if you're forced to imagine the president of the United States, what is it like for him in the Oval Office in the morning making coffee? Like you have to work a little harder to develop that character and make it believable to you, which makes it believable to the reader. And I don't know what my takeaway for this is, other than, don't go out of your way to write about people that you don't have any business writing about. But I think that's kind of the key to why some of these characters pop off the page. Bernie is like, in her own words, she got screwed her whole life. And we don't all think of ourselves that way all the time. So it's like, what kind of a character is that when you decide to write that? That's all I got to say.
I think I talked about this on one of the earliest episodes we ever did. The idea of understanding a character, you only get a couple of details. And this is how you understand other people in life too. You fill in from yourself. you only see somebody at the grocery store, you see them. So there's a couple of details you can kind of, but when you have to assume the kind of person they are, what they might be thinking about, you have to provide all that stuff, your mental theory of mind, your theory of what their mind is like, has to take from yourself and project it onto them. A lot of stuff, a lot of like the background and like just the shape of things. And then you can hone in on little details to adjust it here and there. So like, well, that person's obviously a jerk and I'm not a jerk. So what would a jerk think if they were picking out frozen foods in the frozen foods aisle? So the same thing happens with characters, where there's a default kind of theory of what a human being is, and you have to provide the details that will nudge it towards the character you're trying to portray. And so the more of those you can provide, the more specific you can make that character appear, and the more it can push it over here to be this kind of person, push it over here to be this kind of person, but always relying on that kind of projection of what your audience is going to provide for what a human being is.
Right.
This is what makes, what is the default? And that's why there's so many problems in literature and writing about writing an underrepresented voice, because our defaults are white. Like you said, they're middle class. And the marked case is always the underrepresented, So if I want to write about a character who's Black, I have to describe them as being Black.
Right. Because otherwise you're making bad assumptions.
Yeah. Which I don't like that that's necessary. I really don't like it. But, until our culture is different, until our assumptions are different, I don't know how we get around it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to devolve into that discussion.
I know.
Because I'm not trying to harp on people that try to write this. I'm trying to say that I think George Saunders pulled this off, not because he thought to himself, I'm going to write a poor character, but because he thought to himself, I have this fully imagined character who's probably different from me. And then you end up just stretching, you end up working harder.
Yeah. He's not a professor at a New England university.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Stephen King is kind of guilty of this too, where he tries to represent all types of people in his stuff. I'm not saying he's guilty of it in the sense that it's a bad thing to attempt, but I think it's obvious a lot of times when he's writing people that he's trying to write a character that he hasn't written before. I don't know how to explain it. He's written so much and the characters are so different that it's you can tell he's making a conscious effort, which we don't all make, is my point.
That's the thing. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't all make the conscious effort to write someone different from ourselves. And I'm not saying that you should go out and write a Black person because you're going to be fucking terrible at it. I guarantee it. Because if you haven't thought about it before, you probably shouldn't try it. You should probably read Black authors. But the point is could the person, have dropped out of college, but you are a professor, just imagine someone slightly different, or think to yourself, who is this character really? And some writers, we encounter them all the time in our workshop, have fully developed backstories for characters. I'm one of the people that doesn't. I'm one of the lazy writers that defaults to myself, and I'm so aware of it.
So aware of it that becomes therapy in the workshop.
Yeah, it really is. That's why we talk about writing all the time. We're well, you did a great job. And it's the character, the narrator, when you're mistaking the the writer for the character, that's when they haven't done a whole lot to separate themselves. Anyway, I think George Saunders, intentionally or not, that was a result of this. That's why this character seems so fully fledged. He's a stripper at an aviation themed restaurant. He went there. He went way out of his realm of familiarity, and the characters are better for it and memorable, super memorable. Even if you go out of your way and give your character a job. We don't all even give our characters jobs. Sometimes my people don't even have faces or hair color. I'm just I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I digress.
No, that's a great point. There's some stories we could make that point for any number of stories, but obviously he makes these characters so round and so well described that it's easy to discover that point as we're reading it.
Right. What else did you like about this one?
The dialogue was amazing.
Yeah. I love Bernie's shift too. So the section I read is her coming back from the dead, and the nieces and nephews just kind of blown away that she's back from the dead, first of all, but also talking like this. So you didn't get a sense from what I read, is my point, of who she was before. But we also don't often see characters that have such a dynamic change. We talk about dynamic and static characters, and your main character should be dynamic, right? They should have some kind of change as a result of the point of your story, whatever decisions they're they're making, whatever journey they go on, or whatever like revelation they come to. But Bernie is so different. We never see characters that like do a flip like this. And that's what was also like so exciting. But you think about like movies and things where, okay, here's a bad example, Grease the musical. When Sandy decides she's going to be a hot girl, like that transition is the most exciting part of the film, right? Anytime a character decides to become something different, like you see it in superhero films all the time, like the montage of them changing is exhilarating. So when Bernie comes back from the dead and she's completely different, it's like, this is so exciting. We get to see this alter ego almost. And that's like one of the things a lot of good writing does, at least for the writer, right? We just talked about how we're always defaulting to ourselves, but we're also defaulting sometimes to our best versions or the versions that we think we could be. And that's like exciting to write and experience. So I think that was cool too.
Yeah, there's a line here. Min is saying, I don't know how to make freaking biscuits, Min wails. You know how to read, right? Bernie shouts. You ever heard of a recipe? You ever been in the grave? It sucks so bad. You regret all the things you never did. You little bitches are going to have a very bad time in the grave unless you get on the stick. Believe me. Turn down the thermostat. Make it cold. I like cold. Something's off with my body. I don't feel right. I turn down the thermostat. He looks at me. Go show your cock, she shouts.
It's so weird. I wasn't like laughing out loud when I read it to myself, but when you read it out loud, it's like, this is ridiculous.
Oh, he had fun writing this.
Oh,
he had
yeah.
so much fun writing this.
Yeah, for sure. Which is also a good takeaway. If you're not having fun writing it, then I don't want to read it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you ready to discuss a takeaway then?
Oh, yeah. My takeaway follows right from that is go have fun.
Oh, wow. Wow. John's advice these days. It doesn't have to be a story. Just have fun. I have fun all the time. I write from the hours of 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. religiously. It's so fun.
I don't do that anymore. I can't do that.
I know. No, that is a good takeaway. It's hard to know if you're having fun sometimes, but
yeah, like just bringing her back from the dead is such a
inspired
ballsy move, you know?
Yeah.
It's like I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this. You know, like we talked about the metamorphosis thing just bring it on stage and let it flop around. I was only half kidding. I think, show your cock is not a bad title for this because this is like it just puts it out there. It just
Oh yeah. I like how you say just like put it on stage and let it flop around because, well, I mean, yeah, puns aside, it feels like what people who say that they have fun writing claim is happening, that their characters are just jumping off the page and being alive. I've never experienced that. I've never written a character that suddenly starts steering my sentences, but I think that's what people mean when they say like they came up with an idea and they went with it. Yeah. And, their brain was doing the work and they were having to think hard about it, but they decided to go with it. And that's when you do have fun where you're like, oh, this could happen. And then this is kind of fun. Yeah, that makes sense. Because for me, writing is almost never fun. I like to have written. Yeah.
It is hard.
So I went into full detail of my takeaway at the very beginning there, which is that, George Saunders, I don't know that he has other zombies in other works of his, but if you want to make like your takeaway super memorable, you can do something really insane. I'm not suggesting that you like do something like this exactly or make it like fantasy or sci-fi or have some bizarre thing, but you can do something weird at least that's memorable. Weird stuff is like really, really memorable. The sentiment here, I'm sure we could find in several other written works, right? The idea of like a wasted life or a cheated life or regretting things, that's extremely common. But what's not common here is that, a character might actually come back from the dead and get to articulate that, if not experience it differently. And that's why I'll remember this story. So the takeaway is that you can co-opt a feeling or a sentiment, but if you invent the world and the characters that are memorable, like you could be the one that rises to the top here in my consciousness and probably be considered more clever for it, right? Like we're reading this and thinking, George Saunders, I can't believe he pulled it off. Oh my God, look at him. Good for him. This was incredible. And he might have been over here like grasping at straws, or thinking to himself, I know what I'll do. I'll just make it outlandish as hell. And then people will remember it. He could be pulling one over on us. And that's what I'm suggesting you do. You can be deliberate. You don't have to hope that people recognize good writing. You can force them to recognize it this way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that ties in with my takeaway too.
Yeah.
Go there with it. Put your ideas on stage.
Show your cock.
That's right.
Very good. Thanks, guys.
There's a show called Puppetry of the Penis. I don't know exactly how it works, but it's like people on stage doing puppetry with their penises.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Ew. Wow, it's disgusting. I'll look it up.
It's been like 10 or 12 years since I even looked it up.
I believe you.
I go see that show every weekend.
Yeah. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing to our monthly newsletter at our website, napleswritersworkshop.com. And for daily writing tips, industry news, and great short fiction, join our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Naples Writers Workshop.